Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining another Audit Tuesday. So today we're going to talk about the highlight developments in cyber and GRC. So we're going to talk about the final release of the NIST CyberSecurity Framework 2.0, which includes a new function, Govern. So to help explain the importance of this, we have cyber and governance expert Michael Andrews and Peter Schwacker. Hi, Michael and Peter.
Hi.
Hey, Ashley.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. So, Michael, let's start with you. Can you please introduce yourself to the Audit Tuesday audience, especially your background in governance and compliance?
Hey, everyone. I'm Mike Andrews, a cybersecurity consultant here in Las Vegas. My small company is YouAttest. We do consulting for small to medium-sized businesses. I have a 20-year DoD background, still serving in the Air National Guard as a cyber operations officer. And been doing governance for about 9 years now, starting from when I was a DoD Air Force civilian at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio. Was upkeeping packages for some of the most elaborate DoD networks. We had about 2,000 users at our location, so we did both unclassified and classified. And then really enjoyed it. Went on to Lockheed Martin on the F-35 program, and still doing that today.
Very cool. So, Peter, can you introduce yourself and talk about your depth in GRC and cyber?
Yeah, I'm Peter Schwacker. I'm CEO, co-founder of a company called Nearshore Cyber, based in Oaxaca, Mexico, and New Hampshire. So we work across the border. We provide staffing and recruiting in the cyberspace cross-border in Mexico, Philippines, a little Greece, and Turkey for GRC. We also, for the past year or so, have been doing a lot of VC, so fractional CISO, and the GRC that comes along with that. Do quite a lot of work leveraging things like Vanta as well, building programs, things of that nature. I'm just here because I like Garrett. I think he's cool.
Remember my nickname for him? The principal of least privilege is Garrett.
I love it.
Oh, the principal.
Michael,
That's right.
That's it. That's going to be right here, right here. Principal,
Yeah.
like it.
That's good.
Michael, like it a lot. Wow. Okay.
So, Michael, what is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0?
Yeah, so just to give some background on NIST CSF in general. So about 12 years ago, there was a lot of fears that there would be a cyber attack on our critical infrastructure, which prompted then President Obama to release Executive Order 13636, improving critical infrastructure cybersecurity, which directed NIST to come out with what was eventually released 1 year later as NIST CyberSecurity Framework 1.0, which included 5 functions: identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. That was updated in 2018 to version 1.1, which added in some supply chain aspects. And then just last month, NIST 2.0 was released to add governance in as a 6th function, whereas before it was just a subcategory under the identity function that had 4 parts to it. So in 2.0, it has 31 subcategories. So that's a massive increase in prioritization for governance.
And Peter, what is this organization, NIST?
Yeah, NIST is, I think it's Department of Commerce. Its job is to develop and publish standards for use in the United States, but it's also used around the world. So they cover not just cyber, but weights and measures and stuff like that. But it serves a really important purpose in that they provide resources that everyone can use, and they're really nicely integrated. So people have probably heard of NIST SP 853. That's sort of in a way subordinate to the CSF. There's SP 800-171 for federal contractors. Like, it goes on and on. But they're a special kind of research organization that produces tools and reference materials that are practical. If you're in cyber, you should be familiar with them.
And Garrett, you have experience with NIST. What can you add?
Yeah, that's a we. When we worked together, actually, at a 2-factor company when I was CTO, I flew up to NIST in a scheduled time and said, hey, what'd you do with this two-factor with SSO? I go, this is what I did. There's a layout, blah, 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 blah. It was fun because they were like listening to understand what the industry is doing, what the four people in forefront are to do, to then create documents like NIST CSF for best standards and best practices. So what I'm saying, I have a very positive experience with this and real whatever, where, sometimes I see people look at regulations and, where the hell these people think of this stuff and that. And I actually have human thoughts and human bodies to connect to the people that actually digested the information that we gave them from what we created from the two-factor days and put it into the best practices. So that's my background with NIST.
And Peter, what is this new GovernGV function?
I mean, it's foundational, right? I mean, as Michael said, it was tucked into, the first function before, but now, like, here's the thing, like, read it. It's very readable. There's also a document that includes implementation examples and goes on from there. And unlike a lot of standards that are kind of dry and abstract, it's really very clear. But what the governance part talks about, the high level funding, staffing, areas of responsibility at a high level, and also things like awareness of security across the organization. So in a way, I mean, it's high level, but it's also like foundational. The governance portion has risen in importance to a level where if you're not paying attention to it and you're not investing time and money in it, you're not doing the CSF. There's no, and so there are kickers in there that in the first few pages, things having to do with proper resourcing that I think are they were important before. Now they're clear and easy for everyone to understand.
And Michael, why do you think now, after years of the CSF 1.1 being out, that Govern was added?
I think it was added because a lot of the bigger data breaches we've seen have come down to a failure to have good practices in place or inconsistent practices. So there was just a real need to formalize the process rather than just playing whack-a-mole with risk. They realized the importance of having organizations take the laws and regulations that apply to them, take frameworks such as NIST CSF, implement security controls, policies, and procedures to formalize it so that organizations can better manage this stuff on a continuous basis.
So, Michael, given your experience, do you think this is a good migration?
I absolutely love it because I take a compliance-based approach to managing risk. If you're on LinkedIn a lot, like we are, you'll see a lot of discussions about security versus compliance, and I always try to kind of meet it in the middle in that regard. So I think it's long overdue because organizations can do risk management at the same time as having good governance for the reasons Peter mentioned earlier. Getting proper funding, keeping management informed, so that they can include cyber risk as part of their overall risk management strategy, right? Because cyber risk is the same as economic risk, competitive risk, and this addition of the governance function to NIST CSF 2.0 will go a long way to help in that area.
And Garrett, what are the sections of this new function?
Yeah, there is as Peter said, it is a relatively readable doc. As we were talking prior to this, and not all documents of this type, including this that come out are all that readable. It looks like there's a lot of hand waving and some stuff. Not this one. It's just straight out. It's itemized in this section. In the governance function, you got organizational context. You got your risk management strategy, which I applaud Michael for bringing it up early. It's about risk, not security. It's about risk. I mean, and we can go into that more, but we have to identify our risk, and then we have to apply the right practices and procedures, which goes right to the next govern sub-function: roles, responsibilities, and authority. How could you manage your risk if you're not assigning. If you're not saying, this is your job, when this happens, this is what you take. And that goes right into the next subsection, policies, right? So we got to write policies. I mean, people have rules when they go home. Okay, when you come to work, what are the policies about governance? What's the right policies about privacy? What's the policies about data, etc. And then if you're going to have policies, you better have someone that gives it oversight, and that's the next section. And the last one, which is fun, which is Michael already mentioned, is the supply chain. What people who followed NIST and the CSF see that a lot of these were mentioned before, but now they're collated in the unifying function. And I got that off someone's website. I like that. The unifying function of govern. And that's what we see with these subsections.
That's a lot of categories. So, Peter, how should an enterprise address all these new categories?
One at a time. I mean, it's big. Security's always been big. Now it's just sort of elaborate on it. I mean, I think a top-down approach where whoever's in charge of security, if they have the CISO title or if they don't, needs to understand that the governance section is their job description now, and that they need to be supported in that regard. And so they need to take it like one piece at a time. But ultimately, it's about making sure that, I mean, if you're going to say that you're following NIST, there has to be a commitment at a lot of different levels. So there's going to be a lot of meetings. There's going to be a lot of education. But at the same time, you have to take action. So, while there will be a kind of like piecemeal top-down approach, like we're all getting attacked now, right? And so there's going to need to be both the high level working your way down from the governance down, but you also have to survive day to day. I think one thing that becomes helpful with this is the attention on third-party risk management and the recalibration of costs when it comes to SaaS. There was a story in the Wall Street Journal under the CIO section the other day, and if you have a Wall Street Journal subscription, you can still find it there. I think it was like 2 days ago, where I guess it was yesterday because it's Monday. The article was about the flood of SaaS software, SaaS products, and the overhead that it takes to manage all those. And there are, various conversations reported with CIOs. One of the things that's going to have to happen is the budget that's associated with using partner products, using SaaS products, that's going to have to go up. Because now you're going to have to account for the third-party risk management with that. And a lot of companies are going to be saying, do you do NIST CSF 2.0? Right? Not just show me your SOC 2 report. Good. Right? But does your SOC 2 report incorporate NIST CSF 2.0? Now, first step, read it, study it. That's number one. And take your time with it. Most of us didn't start reading it until it was released a week ago yesterday, right? I got to own that one. I've been, and we're all going to be doing 1.0 for a long time. But do take the time and do start to work with it and prepare for the moment when people start saying, okay, 2.0 now? I don't know, Michael, what do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, it makes total sense.
And Michael, I know Peter touched on it, but is NIST CSF mandatory in any industry, or is it a voluntary framework?
As an overall industry, it's not mandatory for anywhere, but there are a lot of locations around the world where you could say it's mandatory, such as you might see a state say all of our state agencies will use NIST CSF, or you might see a school district say all of our systems within the school district will use CSF, because it's flexible and you can tailor it the way you want it. You don't have to pay anything to use it. So it's also a common vernacular. We can speak to each other without giving each other eight hours of background about how we're doing our cyber risk program, right? Like if you say we use NIST CSF that answers a lot of questions, right? It tells whoever you're talking to that you have some formalized processes in place.
Let me
So
add
there
something to
is a new
that. I mean,
category.
in terms of about when it comes to, let's remember what a framework is. A framework is like a scaffold in a house. Could you build a house without scaffolding? Yeah, you could build a house without scaffolding. Would you want to? I mean, NIST CSF is not something you have to do. It's something you get to do. If you don't want to use it, go straight to SP 853. Spend the money on ISO, right? I mean, the little secret about NIST is most of us started using it because we didn't want to pay, ISO 27001 used to cost like $1,000. It's like $140 now, I think, or it's in Swiss francs. It's probably different. But the point is that CSF is a tool. CSF 2.0 is a better tool. I'm excited about it. I read it. I spent a weekend on it, and it's a paint churner, man. And if you look at it from as something to make the management of all the rest of it easier and better, that's like life's going to get good or less bad. Let's be optimistic about it. But it's not a regulation unless somebody starts to say you must use scaffolding. You must use a motor vehicle to drive to work instead of walking. You could walk to work. I walk to work, but it's because I live here.
So
I
there's
know,
a new
Garrett.
category. We love having you, Peter.
Yes.
So there's a new category, risk management strategy. So why all this talk about risk, Garrett?
Yeah, I think the key word was what Peter said a while ago, budget, right? In budget, and if we have identified our risk, and we know we have a quantified budget, well, what do we do with the budget? We attack what the highest risk are first. And that's why I see, especially in 2023, 2024, where budgets are tight and everyone's scrutinized them, you can defend your strategy. You can say, hold it, these are by far my highest risk. These are my vulnerabilities. This is where I'm going to apply my budget. And I think that's why we're seeing so much talk and a change in talk in risk, as opposed to like when I started my career and everyone was just like security, 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 as if it was a objective that could actually be met.
And Peter, what do you think about the change on focus on risk management instead of cybersecurity?
What the rest of business does, right? I mean, in some respects, this is us catching up with the rest of business. Cybersecurity people have been talking about risk as if like we're special. I'm a CEO. My biggest risk is I don't make payroll, or that I have a client relationship go sour and I got to make up revenue, or I get in trouble with my taxes for some stupid reason. And business is all about risk. It is mostly about positive risk. That's one of the things that mentioned in this CSF 2.0, which I love. Project management people, like if you look at the PMP, they talk about positive risk. CISSP hardly shows up. I'm not even sure it's mentioned. And so this CSF 2.0 is an important step in the professionalization of cybersecurity. Where does it go next? I mean, there is the NIST risk management framework. There are mentions of enterprise risk management. So we're not done, right? But when we talk about like the way to become successful at cybersecurity as a leader is understanding the business. This is us moving closer to that. It wasn't about them understanding us. They know materiality. We say, look, what's materiality? Well, talk to your CFO. They know what materiality is because they know what matters to the business. And so it's another benefit that if you're a CISO and if you wonder what your job is, like now you have it, it's in there.
And Michael, do you think that this NIST to CSF 2.0, it changes the conversation from cybersecurity to a more risk-based view of the enterprise, which is indicative of the message that GRC has been given along? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, as Peter said, it brings us a lot more in line with how businesses operate. We can't be the IT people in the corner trying out our new, software and me on the keyboard too much. We have to understand what matters to the stakeholders, the boardroom, the clients, things like that. And as I mentioned earlier, we can't look at risk as whack-a-mole. Oh, look, we got this new CVE, vulnerability comes out. We have to whack it. Yes, you need a process for dealing with what comes up day to day since things change in general, but we need to make this a repeatable process. If we're going to have a chief information security officer on the board, they need to be contributing just like any other board member, right? Taking that comprehensive business approach rather than looking at cybersecurity as a siloed thing off to the side.
So what are the benefits of using a framework like CSF 2.0? Peter, let's start with you.
NIST itself, it's free. It's paid for by your tax dollars. It's one of the best things the United States government has done since the internet and regulation of the dairy industry. It's good stuff. It's completely
I
open.
just heard a podcast. That's great. Yeah.
Wait, do you have a milk podcast? Because I want to be on that one.
I don't know. It's like things you should know in history. The how Al Capone saved America by fighting the dairy industry.
Yeah. He wasn't all bad. But oh my God. Yeah. It's accepted by everybody. It's been around long enough. You can see one of the things I like about it is you can witness its provenance. Like, we all know it came from. This is written by real people. Like, they actually list the authors and the contributors, and you can find those people on LinkedIn. I've reached out to some of them. They'd probably like to hear from people, right? It's not something that comes from on high or Switzerland. Nothing wrong with Switzerland. Cuckoo clocks and chocolate, those are great. But it's kind of like everybody's, no matter where you are in the world. And even in Mexico, people are starting to adopt it instead of ISO. Some of it even gets translated to Spanish, which is super cool. It tends to show up in my perspective. I'm curious about Michael's. It shows up as a component of SOC 2 compliance efforts, right? Or getting to a SOC 2 report. And so it's a really nice sort of like add-on. So you have like SOC 2, and a lot of people are getting dragged into those right now. Even small businesses are with like 10, 20 people. So you get that, and then you have, okay, what is our framework? All right, CSF. And then CSF can point to SP 853. So you get this like nice like 3-layer structure that becomes sort of manageable. And it will also tell you how to manage it through the, to some degree through the governance section or function.
Michael, what are your thoughts?
I really like that it's just a little bit over 100 controls rather than the NIST risk management framework, which is over 1,000 common control indicators, which is basically just security controls. For anyone that's done one of those risk assessments, it's a paperwork exercise, probably more than it needs to be in a lot of situations, whereas NIST CSF is attainable. Whether you have a 4-person company or a 100-person company or 1,000-person company, you can get value out of that. And as Peter spoke about briefly, how it integrates in with something like SOC 2, let's use another example. We have the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act for finance companies. One thing it says is to do an annual risk assessment. And I've heard people say, well, where does it say what to do as part of that risk assessment? Where's the actual framework? Well, it's like, no, you pick the one that's relevant to your organization. And NIST CSF 2.0 is a perfect methodology to use for that.
Garrett, what about the opposite? So what are the consequences of not adhering to the cybersecurity framework?
Well, they actually listed it out, and it was kind of interesting because they have this tier approach to if you're not doing it, and then to the ultimate state, much like the zero trust maturity model from CISA, where they're basically saying if you got nothing going on right now in the government, right? What you're doing with your decision making is chaotic. It's no accountability, right? We don't know who's responsible, and then the process and the people become confused, And the ultimate result, they state, is that we're going to have reputational damage. I mean, it's everyone's talking about it right now in our world. Our friends over at Change Healthcare and Optum, right? Is that reliable? Are people happy with it? Not saying they didn't have good practices, but that is the result. The result of poor governance is some event, right? Either a very little used social media platform could go down because you don't have good change control, right? Or your healthcare doesn't get, you know what I'm referencing, Michael, or your healthcare bills don't get processed, etc. So that's what it is. Just while I'm talking, let's talk about the CSF 2.0, their tiers, because they're basically saying you start at the level and you're ad hoc, you're at partial, and then you say, let's get up to where you're informed. They call it risk informed. I like tier 3. That's where people have to go. And I believe in this tier because, well, we built YouAttest around this principle. Repeatable. I don't believe governance is governance unless you put something in place that's repeatable. One time, panic, email in the morning, we got to get this done. That's not repeatable. That's ad hoc. That's confusing. That's how we built YouAttest for the concept of identity governance. They give you a repeatable pattern of able to review your users or whatever the governance is. And then the next stage is what all these documents coming from the government talk about is adaptive, which I love, which basically says, hey, if I have information here, shouldn't we be acting on it over here, right? What is your process? And really is, let's combine AI with actual policies, procedures, and practices. All good.
And Michael, NIST CSF 2.0, it's not the only framework. So can you talk about some of the other frameworks?
Yes, there are numerous. So NIST CSF is largely based off of NIST 853 revision 5, which is the current one, which ties into the NIST risk management framework, which I spoke about earlier, which that one is NIST 800-37. So 53R5 as well as ISO 27001. Those are kind of what I view as the foundational ones. So when you see other frameworks like CIS-18 from the Center for Internet Security, or COBIT, that's COBIT, 2019 from ISACA, they're taking a lot of parts of these foundational frameworks and tailoring it for a specific purpose. And then you have some industry related stuff. You have the payment card industry data security standard, which is based off these similar foundational documents. You have SOX, that's SOX for public companies. So when the new framework comes out and I'm at a conference or something, or just in a meeting, it's kind of funny when people say like, oh, well, how are you going to deal with that? I go, well, I'm just going to look at the mapping and see like, with CSF, like, okay, point A over here. Oh, that lines up with point D over here. Because if you think about it, cyber controls are largely the same, right? Like two-factor authentication is always be needed. You're always gonna have to do auditing. You're always gonna have to do backups, things like that. So as long as you know how to map one to another, you'll be fine no matter which frameworks are thrown at you if you're in the industry.
And Garrett, how does YouAttest address these issues of governance?
Yeah, and that's what I referred to in the last question. The bottom line is governance is that unifying. I like what we said. It's that circle inside all the other activities. What YouAttest is focused on is an easily repeatable, and now with our AI, adaptive mechanism to understand the risk of your identities and then create a repeatable process for the risk manager to attest, that's hence the name, attest that the roles and privileges that surround the users, that are given to the users, and I don't care if they're internal users, supply chain users, that those are quantified, attested to, and approved. So security-wise, it gets rid of the security and ghost accounts. Governance-wise, it puts a practice in place that is quantified and repeats the process of removing identities and removing excess privileges.
Peter, do you see the govern feature GV being adopted by other frameworks?
That's an interesting question. Well, if ISO does, it'll take them a long time to do it. I mean, like CIS touches on it, but it's not really what that's about. I don't think so. I mean, one way to look at this is like this is the best we've seen across any framework that I've seen, and I have a feeling that it's kind of like this is NIST's now. I don't know why you would duplicate it. And frankly, like the fact that anybody can get this thing and it's an open standard, it is, open to critique, it's free, and unless you consider the fact that it's paid for by taxpayers, like I just don't see any reason to. But I think, the real question is like, are people actually going to use it and abide by it? There are going to be some knife fights over this one in boardrooms and the executive level. Like, wait a minute, you told us that like this NIST cybersecurity framework was cool, but you didn't tell me it was going to cost money. Well,
Yeah, I think
I think it's, and that's another reason it's going to take a while. But no, I think I would be surprised if anybody can improve on this other than NIST in their next cycle. And I think they're talking about 2028 for the next revision, if I recall.
Interesting.
Perfect. So we have some questions from the audience. So this question is for Michael and Peter. So it says, I see all these jobs on governance since April 2023. So it's all about cyber, governance, IT, and compliance. So are we seeing more jobs in governance and compliance? Michael, let's start with you.
Yeah, I'd say it's a good amount more from what I've seen. Maybe a little bit less like cyber engineering. That from glancing through it, even though I'm not really looking, I still look at the job boards just to see what companies are looking for, read the job descriptions and things like that. Also mentor a handful of students, and there's actually a lot more excitement about governance and what used to be looked as kind of like the paperwork part, because I think a lot of people are understanding that most organizations aren't doing it that well. It's a little bit like the Wild West, as opposed to just risk in general, where you can like look at a risk score and say, make it go lower. This is a little more abstract right now. And there's a lot of opportunity in the field. And as I do with the students I mentor, I would encourage any of you on the session to, if you're looking to get into the field, strongly consider it. And if you have any questions about how it is day to day or in general or career options, please feel free to reach out anytime on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to discuss it with anybody.
Peter, what about you? What are you seeing?
Most of what we're seeing in terms of the staff and recruiting business is governance, third-party risk management. And that rose pretty quickly in the past like 6 months. Now, the question is like, I mean, if you're looking to get into security for the first time, is starting with governance, risk, and compliance a good idea? I would say no. The way in, and by the way, I operate a community and with the Discord and all that stuff. We can talk about it over there. Maybe we can share that out later. But the way into a GRC career is through IT and business. You must understand how businesses work. You have to understand like how businesses make money, how they spend money, how they govern that part, right? So there's like cybersecurity governance, but then there's like corporate enterprise risk management, that level of governance. And you have to understand how they meet and how the decisions get made in a way that aligns one to the other. And if you're coming in like first job, like forget it, you're not going to know. Now, that said, there's also the IT part. So the way into GRC is in the same way the way into cybersecurity is really through IT. You got to know systems. You got to know how networking works. You have to understand how applications work. You really do have to learn how to write code. Sorry, it's a myth that you can get into this without knowing something about how to write software. Happy to have other conversations about it. Like Michael, I'm easily found on places like LinkedIn and Pinterest.
Pinterest.
I have Pinterest account. It's true.
That big tech platform. Yes.
Can you connect the conversation to the CISA CSAT stepper risk assessment tool? Peter, let's start with you this time.
I don't use it.
Yeah.
I use Vanta and Drat and stuff like that.
That one,
I mean, I
Michael?
played with it. But I just find that there's other stuff.
Michael, what about you?
The CISA, the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency tools.
Yeah, the CSAT.
Yeah. Well, CISA offers a lot of great tools for free. I think in all cases, maybe you have to pay in some cases, but they want to be a resource to business. So some of their tools are automated, and some of them you just contact them and set it up, and they can help an organization that has NIST CSF in place. They can help meet a lot of these security controls. It's largely related to vulnerability management. They have a lot of great resources to protect ransomware, because that can really crush a business. So yeah, I mean, this stuff isn't one size fits all. You might have to use multiple, pieces of software, such as YouAttest for, identity, different Microsoft tools, CrowdStrike, maybe Cloudflare to keep your sites up. And that's why it's a risk management framework. So we should have to keep that in mind, that it needs to be tailored. It's not one size fits all.
Garrett, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I want to credit first both the speakers. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Michael. And I get an extra shout out to Michael. If you look at the LinkedIn chat right now, you'll see that there's a link to a document that Michael prepared that maps not only NIST CSF 2.0, but CMMC 2.0 and 853 to the key controls that YouAttest as an identity governance tool addresses. So great work, Michael. And yeah, let's. I'm glad to talk to you and go over with it. Take it away, Ashley.
So, Michael, can you tell the audience how they can reach you?
Yeah, I can be found on LinkedIn every day. If you just search my name, Michael, my last name's Andrewes, spelled very uniquely. There's only one other one. He's a consultant in Australia that I don't know. And for our YouAttest, we're at YouAttest.com. That's YASTIS, or on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and X.
And Peter, can you tell the audience how they can reach you?
If you can't remember how to spell my name, most people can't, look for Nearshore Cyber. That's my company. You can also find me on our Discord and in any of our free education events and incident response tabletop games.
Yeah, and take up Peter. One of my buddies went to your CISSP class and loved it. He really,
cool.
He said that was great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Perfect. And then we at YouAttest can be reached at youattest.com, or of course, just write us at info@youattest.com. Thank you so much, Peter. Thank you, Michael. We really appreciate it.
Great topic.
Thanks,
great guest. Great work, Ashley. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.